Welcome to the Lightforge. This is ADWCTA.
This is Merps, and I think we've been blessed this expansion. We've had so many changes, so many curveballs thrown at us, and once again, we get to talk about a new meta. How many times do we get to
Yeah,
talk about a new
seriously.
meta?
How many
Yeah.
new metas has there been in this expansion? Okay, so there's been one per week, right? For the first four
Yes.
weeks. And then even the 4 week, after that's over, there was a new meta because they Blizzard did the whole thing where they took cards out of the arena. And then, like, a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks after that, there was the big overall not arena specific patch, which
Right.
destroyed execute, not destroyed, like lowered it slightly, execute, and then also like some shaman cards, and then last week we had another one, which is 7 metas. That is 7 metas in one expansion, having nothing to do with how people play cards. Like literally, like Blizzard changed rules 7 times. So it's been a pretty exciting time for the arena when it comes to just like adjusting and figuring stuff out.
Yeah. Really interesting and just really good. Blizzard seems to number one be keeping an eye out for arena players now. But
Mm-hmm.
number two, you can sort of just tell from all of their movements, not just in the arena, but in constructed as well, or with the heroic tavern brawl. They seem to want to make the game a little bit more competitive, right? Or
Yep.
at least test the waters of competitive Hearthstone just a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
So that's always pretty exciting. But we'll see what they have down the road, and like you've heard my thoughts on it. I won't say anymore, but
Yeah.
hopefully they do skew it towards more competitive.
So now let's do a deep fried meta. This deep fried meta, where we deep fried the meta, is going to be entirely about this new meta that we find ourselves in now that we didn't really talk too much about last week because we had like 2 days in the new meta when the Lightforge came out. And now we have been playing a lot. Well, Merps has been playing a ton, and I've also been playing more than usual. So I think we have a pretty good grasp of this new meta. So let's talk about what's going on now. Like if you jump into the arena now, for presumably, okay, so first of all, I'm making an assumption. Blizzcon is next week. It starts on Thursday. They are not going to do the thing where the week after that they release the new expansion. This is not going to be OE like last year. The actual expansion is not going to release till December. I'm coming out, I'm making this prediction, and I'm pretty confident in it because it is a large expansion. And usually, the end date of adventures are timed with the full release of large expansions. So we're looking at like early December here, which means that this meta, hopefully Blizzard's not going to touch it again, especially because after BlizzCon, like they don't really need to touch this kind of stuff again because the tournament scene has been set and over. We're going to stay here for like a month and a half.
Yeah,
So yeah.
I think
So
so.
on that note, what's happening? What's happening? What is how would you describe this meta and how it's different from other metas?
So this meta is different in that, I mean, it's not dominated by an expansion anymore, right?
Yep.
Karazhan cards are here, but it is not, it is obviously no longer a Karazhan meta. It's like when like you had certain cards always define the meta before. Karazhan was defined by Fireland's Portal, right? Um, was it TGT or LOE that was Keeper of Ordomon? Like, I
It's
forget.
LOE
LOE,
because
right?
TG2 was all
Explorers,
the other good paladin cards, which is why
right,
when LOE came out with
right,
Keeper of Voldemort, we were like, "What are you doing, Blizzard? Do you
right.
think
And
paladins
then
aren't powerful enough?"
right, and GVG was Muster for Battle and Shield and Minibot, right?
Yes.
So, but that's the thing. Like you could, whenever you look at any specific meta, you always identified key powerful cards that were given to a certain class, right? And then that defined the meta. So it was always,
Oh
you know,
man, the
uh,
Temple Priest of GVG, I missed that. And that was it wasn't because of the offering odds, it was just because at that time there weren't enough cards. So when you release a new expansion, it was automatically a huge like you get like more than one. I would think you got like one and a half Shrinkmeisters every draft as the priest. Like it was ridiculous. And Valence too.
Yeah, that's basically the priest version of Argent Protectors, right? You want to get out onto the board, you want to leverage it to your advantage, and it's worse than Argent Protector against some things, but then you could do tricky stuff with like Shadow Madness or
The
or
Shadow
Shadow or
Madness
Pain or
plays,
something.
yeah.
yeah, which is always pretty fun. But yeah, so now what we're seeing is just a very pure sort of play style,
Yes,
right?
I like that word, pure. Like
Yeah,
purify.
yeah. Exactly. Well, so now you just get to see all the classes in like how they would be played. The, and then it also takes away a lot of these synergies that you were seeing before. So you don't see like
Yes.
secrets plus Medivh,
Oh my
secrets plus
god.
post Huntress, any of that stuff. It,
The
it
whole
really
like
is.
secrets thing with the mage, like I got way
Yeah.
more annoyed by that than Firelands Portal. Because Firelands Portal's a bit RNG, but it's like turn 7, it's pretty predictable, like you deal with it. Like that secret with the 2 mana card that deals 3 damage that's better than a fire elemental, like I can't that was really annoying to me.
It was very bad. And I remember one of the games I played. So the mage played counterspell on turn 3, even though I later found out he had like a spider tank in his hand. But he played counterspell, so on turn 4 he could double Medivh.
Yep.
You know, this is a pre change, and I was like, yeah, that's obviously the correct move. I'm not
Yes.
gonna play a spell when there's no minions out there, so the secret's gonna keep. And then he's able to play two threes and deal
Remove
out
whatever the
six
heck you put
separated
out.
damage.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yep,
Yep.
it's
Totally the right move.
game changers. And again, this is back when Blizzard was like, so there's one card that's like really not that good, right, in the mage, and so we're gonna make it a common, and we're gonna make Firelands Portal a common because that's like babbling book, really. And that after you play in the Karazhan meta, you're like, oh my god, you were so wrong. Like, well,
I mean,
before you
they're
even
they're all
played,
good. They're
before
all
you
really
even played it, you were probably like, okay, Firelands Portal clearly best, and this 2 drop that you say is bad or like average or like not as good as the other 2 cards, it's pretty much as good as the other 2 cards when
yeah.
you give it an offering bonus and you
I can't even
incentivize drafts.
right. I can't even say which ones. Like book is crazy good too,
Yeah,
right? Medivh is crazy good when you give offering bonus to it. It's just yeah, it's really sickening.
yeah. Okay,
But
let's stop circle jerking. That's my fault. I started
okay,
it.
yeah, yeah.
Let's now go into okay. So this is a pure meta, right? And in a pure meta, you do normal things and you win on normal things. I've noticed personally, my win rate became a lot more stable once this new patch came out. And it's a lot more stable for the very good reason that there's a lot less RNG and there's a lot less synergies in the arena. And so when you're a kind of fundamentalist kind of player where you get on the board, you figure out when you're going phase, you figure out whether you win on card advantage or top. It's the stuff we keep teaching you, right? Like the fundamental stuff. If that's what your bread and butter is, you're going to have a better time in this meta. In fact, this is the kind of meta you're always looking for. A meta with like as little crazy stuff as possible, right? And as little like meta tilting things as like even OG, which was pretty fundamental, still had the tilt of well, there's too many taunts, so everything's got to be
Right.
like circling around that. There's none of that now. Like it's very well balanced, I think, in terms of play styles. Like control play styles, they work. You get the cards, you can play it, you can keep that card advantage and wipe people off the board. Aggro control, it works. Snowball, it works because not everybody is going to be fighting with you on the board. You're going to still have rogues and mages which can play a bit more control style. You can have priests which can play a bit more control style, and they're all around. Even warriors now with Fool's Bane, depending on what like decks you have, they can sometimes pull back a little too, and it creates a lot of diversity. You have so many ways you can win the game as almost any class right now, and it's good to see, and it makes me as a player playing my playstyle feel a lot more comfortable that my expectations of what my opponent will do will be correct a higher percent of times, which allows me the freedom to do so many more turn planning things, so many more like reads, so many more prediction things, and it's a good environment for I think good fundamental players.
I think that's a great point. I've definitely seen my win percentage go up. Not just like on stream, because like my runs on stream are very little compared to actually all the runs that I do. Period. But off stream, I've been doing very very well as well, and I think it is because you things are less simple, right? When there is a huge offering bonus, especially for an adventure, players know that okay, so on turn 7 I play around Fireline's Portal. Like I just don't play around Flame Strike. Period. right? Or they know sort of like how decks are going to be built, and they also know how their decks are going to be built,
Yep.
which still takes skill because you still need to know these things. But when you take away the offering bonus, everything's wide open,
Right.
right? And it comes down
it
to
takes
these small
knowledge skill
percentages.
before where you like have to know what the
Yeah.
meta is, but then after you know what the meta is, you play against it the same way. Like now, you not only have to know what the meta is, which is arguably less important because it's a more normal meta, but you really have to know when it happens, which way you go. Like there are more forks in the road now than there used to be. You're no longer
Right.
funneled into the Firelands portal meta all the time.
Right. So, using the Firelands portal as an example, you are not really sure now. And if you're not really sure what to play around, then you have to rely on your reads from like turn two to until turn seven, right? You have to know what cards they played. You have to see how they played, and then based on that, you have to say, all right, I can play into Flame Strike because I don't think he has a Flame Strike.
Right.
But that is much harder than you just saying like statistically it's always
Yeah.
Firelands portal.
Yeah.
So
And you have to look more on your hand, and you have to say like, oh, their chances of having a Firelight Portal or a Flame Strike or this other thing versus my deck, and how big my deck is, and how fast my deck is, and the number of cards in my hand, and the types of cards in my hand, and what I can do. Like all that stuff comes more into play when
right.
things are more normal and fundamental. And that's all good because it's a good time to like learn too, right? Like you don't get as much variance, right? I'm gonna harp on this a lot. Like there was so much variance in the Karazhan meta where you much more frequently had games that were unwinnable
Yes.
because of RNG or combos. Like I count combos as RNG really because it's about whether your opponent hits them or not, which is based on card draw, which is based on RNG. Less so than like if everyone had like Spider Tank, Yeti, Pit Fighter, Boulder Fist Ogre, right? Then you kind of like have to play and you have to like turn plan and do that. But if you're doing combos, it's kind of like, well, if you have the combo, then the skill kicks in which how do you set it up? How do you trick your opponent? But there's a huge RNG factor of can you even hit your combos to begin with? And generally speaking, no matter how badly you screw up your combos, it's still going to be pretty damn effective. So, because it's a combo, right? It's like you won because you hit it. Like, that's why you picked it, because you get this outsized value when you have these two cards in your hand. So, the fewer of those, the better. And Karazhan, anytime you have an offering bonus, first of all, you enable combos more. Because you're just more likely to, you have more security in drafting combos. Right? If I have something that
Sure.
synergizes with secrets, and I know I have offering bonus to these secret cards or to these secrets or whatever, right? I can draft on that. It would be smart for me to draft on that. It would be stupid of me to ignore that. And so these combo decks happen more frequently, and they're also more powerful because generally these new cards are powerful, or else you wouldn't consider them. So yeah, so that's the whole variance aspect of it, and it's gone down, and that's definitely a good thing.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And this is sort of a play style that we haven't experienced really, right? Like because we've always been jumping from
Yeah.
expansion to expansion. So this is actually like almost like the newest meta that there
Eh.
is. It's really weird how we never see like all these cards just having the same offering bonus. It definitely changes things up. Like it's hard to notice, but when you look for it, it really is such a huge impact because well, it's not like I have no idea what cards to play around. You just rely on your reads. But yeah, like that helpful guide is gone,
Yeah.
like on certain turns.
I
Yeah,
mean, I think it's very similar to LoE, like in terms of pace, in terms of what you do. Like the thing you're going to probably bring up is Keeper of Oldemon, which is true. LoE was
it was
very
dominated
tilted
by Keeper of
towards
Oldemon.
Keeper of
Yeah,
Oldemon because it was still like TGT was just winding down. Everyone was playing Paladins. Keeper of Oldemon was not only super powerful but game changing in a way that Paladins couldn't do before.
yeah.
But that one quirk of LoE aside, I think it's pretty similar in the way like I play it, in the way that it's a lot more like just on the board fundamentals, because the key mechanic in LoE was like discover, and there weren't like terribly great cards, right? Like we remember the Blizzard statistics. The cards that were good were like Tomb Spider and Jeweled Scarab. Whoop de doo,
Well,
right?
those were picked. I mean, Ethereal Conjurer was also in
Ethereal
there.
Conjure was also in there, but again, it's
Right.
not a big deal. That's normal,
No,
like,
no.
mage value kind of card. It was very good. It is very good, but it's not, like, it doesn't tilt the meta too heavily. The way
Right.
Keeper of Oldemon did. But Keeper of Oldemon aside, this is kind of like the LoE meta without Keeper of Oldemon, the way I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, I definitely see it as something like that. Where y- like if we were to define the the Karazhan meta, right? Like so before they got rid of the offering bonus, the Karazhan meta
Yeah.
was you either had to go very slow or very fast,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like we called it sort of the death of the mid range,
Yep.
almost, because the meta was defined by mages, and mages were all control. Like I would say like 19 out of 20 mage decks were
Mm-hmm.
control decks, not tempo, because Firelands Portal and like Medivh with these secrets, like it makes you play control.
Yep.
So you had to beat the number one deck, which is mage control. You weren't getting more control than that, so you had to either go faster or you were unlucky enough to draft like the ultimate control deck.
Or you're a
Um,
priest and you can sort of
yeah, you
outlast the
can.
mage. There are
Yeah, yeah,
options. It's just
maybe.
very few and very
Very
particular.
few.
Like they're
Yeah.
the exceptions to the rule. But yeah, like this is why, like in a normal deep fried meta about a new meta, we give you like pretty specific things of like to do or not to do because we know those are helpful. Like we like to talk theory, so we'll talk the theory stuff too, and the people who like follow and can like take the theory and turn it into applicable elements of their own game, that's great, and that's why we do it. But we also give like very specific like things that everybody, whether you are at the level in which you can take like pure theory and apply it to the game or not, you can do, right? Like in OG, we said don't go face, right? Like don't go face at all. You're not gonna finish your opponent off. And hunters are bad because of that. Like it was very specific. Like just expect taunts because you're gonna have taunts thrown into your face. Like never be in a position where if my opponent plays a taunt, I lose. And the game was going to slow down, and the game was going to be on the board. Like we gave you all these things to like prepare you. In the Karazhan meta, as soon as it came out, we were like, you just got to beat Firelands Portal, and we gave you specific ways of how to go under Fireland Portal, and then we talked about the priest and how you can go slower than the Firelands Portal. We talked about the kind of trap that warlocks were sunk into. And sometimes just a value game, right? Like when they buffed all the classes, nerfed mage and rogue, and didn't touch paladin, we said, well, look, paladins are going to be bad because they still have all these bad cards, and they were never as good as rogue or mage, who can kind of withstand it. There were like very specific things that we can tell you. There's not anymore. Like
Nope.
this is such a normal meta that is all about fundamentals. There are no more like tricks or like overall things that we can tell you that if you knew this and your opponent didn't know this, you were at an advantage. That doesn't exist in this meta. Uh, like you're still gonna see a lot of mages. We'll talk about class balance next. But you're gonna see the kind of the same thing where there's just it's normal. Like I call the topic the new normal because it's not just like now we're gonna call this normal. This is normal. This is kind of like classic, kind of like Nax, kind of like OE, kind of like if you just stripped away everything because that's all they did. Blizzard stripped away everything, and this makes, I think, generally speaking, it makes good players very happy. And in my opinion, Arena's exciting enough. Like if you just kind of leave it alone, and then like tweak a little bit of the balance stuff, because like class balance and things like that. Just because there's always randomness, right? There's always so much randomness. Your opponent can always pick any card. You can always have any card. So there's already so much stuff you need to control. You don't really need Blizzard to put their thumb on the scale and be like, we're now in a Karazhan meta.
Yeah, yeah.
So the fact that they do it, I'm not like entirely against it, just because you kind of want to play with the new cards. But I love this whole thing where they like take it away after a little bit, right?
Yeah, I really do like it. And they haven't really said what they're doing going forward, right? Like exactly what they're doing with the next expansion.
Yeah. So Blizzard, if you're listening, at least we really like it. Like really, really like it. Like this is such a good development. If in the future you have the arena be like 2 weeks or like a month of the new meta and then take away that offering bonus, we would be more than on board.
Yeah, definitely. So I like what you said about sort of, well, we have no sort of like quick tips to give anymore,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you guys are still looking for direction or sort of, if that's what you're looking for from us, suggestions would be, now is a great time to work on these skills,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
ADWCTA says it's a very fundamental meta right now. So all the things that we talk about, like board trades and reads especially, right? Now it's just great time to hone these skills, and it's also a great time for you to just like face other people and sort of like it's a very even playing field right now. It's a very even playing field. It's not turning so much on drafting like the number of portals or drafting like the number of spirit claws or something. Everything's evened out a little bit. The classes have sort of all come together a little bit more. The number one class isn't as oppressive, so work on these skills.
Yep.
And who knows what's going to happen next expansion? But these are the skills.
Priest. I know what's gonna happen. It's gonna be Priest.
It has to be priest.
Gadgetzan, which we'll talk about afterwards, is gonna be so good for Priest.
We keep on saying that one of the last skills, but the skill that will push you into the infinite/super infinite group are like reads and this like all these small percentage plays, right? So great time to work on it right now. Yeah, you probably have like a month or so until it's dominated by, I don't know, the Flaming Pony of Death.
The Flaming Pony of Death, also known as the Priest card, that heals you and destroys your opponent's minions in one fell swoop with 2 mana. Priest needs something. Good. They're gonna be like, this is an arena card to balance. It'll have like a specific line that says, I don't know, if you put this card in your deck, you cannot, I don't know, put some random constructed card in. That's super helpful. Because it doesn't exist in the same world as like Auchenai Soul Priest or something. I don't know.
You have to have 2 copies of Purify in your deck in order to use this.
There we go.
There you go.
But yeah, no, it's gonna be good. Okay, so class balance. Where are we? What is going on with class balance in this new meta? In Karazhan, it was clear mage, very, very, very high on number 1, vaguely number 2-ish rogue, and then you have like your warrior, your shaman, your paladin, not your paladin, your warrior, your shaman, your, what class am I thinking of? Your druid. And then you have like your warlocks, your paladins, your priests, your hunters, maybe hunters are a little above. This is kind of scrambled in there. But definitely that was kind of where we were on the Karazhan meta. So all the cards are still there, but the offering bonus is gone. What's going on now?
So a lot of people were talking about how oppressive mages were, how frustrating they were to not only play against, but also just to play, period. Because if you're a mage, you're going to be facing other mages. And because both of you guys are control decks, it's going to come down to whoever has the better roles on the Firelands portal.
Yep.
Right? You portal their stuff, they portal your stuff. Whoever gets a higher stated minion is probably...
I don't know why you think that's a question. It's always your opponent.
Always your opponent. Never lucky. It's definitely less oppressive in that sense now. When you face a mage, especially in the early sort of games during the run, right? Before, even if you are at 4 or 5 wins, that mage is going to have the portals, like multiple portals, just because of the offering bonus.
I like how you just call that the early part of the run. Oh yeah, 4 or 5 wins. That's the early part of the run. The run's far from over.
Sure, yeah. Well, everyone's aiming to be infinite, right? And if you take 7 as the baseline, then obviously 4 or 5 is still early. Mm-hmm. But because everyone knows, if you get into the 10, 11 wins and you're facing a mage, or you're facing any class, right? They're going to have a crazy good deck.
Yes.
Crazy good deck with probably a very good player behind that deck as well. But yeah, so nowadays when you play against the mage, yes, mage is still number 1 because they still have a lot of
mage is still number 1. Key point.
Yep. A lot of removals, a lot of powerful, impactful cards, and the ping hero power is timeless, right? It is always good. It will always be good. So mages are still number 1, but much less frustrating, which is fantastic.
Which means Rogue is now closing in as number 2. As we know, Rogues did not get very good cards in the Karazhan meta, and then they got nerfed on top of that with the removal of 2 like excellent cards in Auto Barber and Undercity Valiant.
At the 2 spot as well.
Oh, it's horrible.
Yeah.
So now Rogues, by not having offering bonus to like less than their normal pool of cards, kind of like value cards, they're just rising. And mages, remember, like we keep saying, oh, mages are still on the top. But mages lost a lot. Mages like got slammed when you take away the Karazhan meta, and they're still clearly on top. But it just means that that gap went from like being like so wide that you can take rogues and priests and they're still closer than rogues and mages to like just a normal like, yeah, it's better than rogue.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, you have a whole bunch of stuff which I'm not going to talk about because they're pretty balanced. Like the classes that we thought were like maybe on the more powerful side, like shaman, they lost a lot. And the classes that we thought maybe were on the more downswing, like warlock and paladin, they gained by having this bonus removed to not so good cards and having their other cards increase. Well, the paladin did. For the warlock, the meta's just better because warlocks were uniquely bad at the Karazhan meta in terms of how they played. So it's all kind of in the middle. At the very bottom, of course, Priest is still there. Priest of the Feast was good. You no longer see it. Its offering bonus really went down hugely dramatically because it used to have Purify slot, and it no longer has Purify slots. It's now just like any other card. So, and Priest of the Feast was good for the meta too, right? It has 6 health against Firelands Portal. So we had this whole episode about like how Priest, like 2 or 3 back, about how Priest was actually pretty good for this meta. Well, the meta changed, and now Priest is not uniquely good for the meta. Priest is just kind of there. So it is the worst class right now, but it's not that bad. Like,
No.
it's really not that. Like, I played I think last week, chat was like, at the very end, chat was like debating between some classes, and they picked Priest, and everyone was like, oh, we're all going to vote for 4 wins. And it was like a normal Priest deck, nothing to write home about, also nothing like bad. I think I had like 1 Valens. I had like the right number of like 2 and 3 drops and whatever. We went 10 wins, and it wasn't like the biggest surprise in the world we went 10 wins. Like, it was definitely overperforming, but it's a totally viable class to play right now, even if it's at the bottom. Like, someone has to be... Like, this is the way to put it, right? Like, Blizzard says it a lot, and at various points, it's either true or they're just trying to cover up the fact that the arena is super unbalanced. But right now, I think really Priest is... Someone has to be at the bottom. So Priest is at the bottom. Hunter's really close, too, because Karazhan was good for Hunter, and you not only got rid of those bonuses, but those bonuses were to curve cards, which you absolutely need, and the meta swung against it. So I think Hunter and Priest are probably pretty similar now in terms of how bad they are, but Priest is probably still at the very bottom. So that's like how the class balance shakes out. But yeah, like, don't be afraid to play Priest. Don't be afraid to play Hunter. I don't know about Hunter, but Priest is definitely going to get better next expansion.
Wasn't there news? I think it was Mike Denice or Ben Brode like went on another stream. I think it was VLPS's stream and said that Priest is getting some good cards.
Oh, okay, so it was like actually confirmed. But like, I don't know
Yeah.
if Blizzard really knows what good and bad cards are. Like, I wouldn't take that
That's
too
fair.
seriously. Like, I'm
Well,
sure
I
they
trust
know.
them more with good cards than saying no, this card is not good, right?
And they're talking about it from a constructive perspective, which
True,
could be
true.
very, very different than what it is in the arena perspective.
Right.
So, like, I wouldn't take that to be, like, too much. Like, there's 2 layers, right? Like, one is that there's actually, like, a legit difference between what's good in constructed and what's good in arena. And 2, we kind of know what they feel is good and bad in arena, and they have a pretty wide margin of error in terms of their predictions of what cards are, like, rated where. So, just, I mean, look, they're going to try is kind of what's definitely going to happen, right? They have an agenda for this next expansion. Kind of the same way they had an agenda in LoE to make Warriors better. They have an agenda in this new upcoming Gadgetzan expansion to make Priests better. So it's going to be better. How much better? I don't know. But like, Priests are not going to get screwed. Is kind of the idea, and it fits the theme, right? Like, OG save Shamans, Karazhan save Hunter, and now we're gonna save Priest. And before that, it was LoE saving Warrior, right? Like, you just take the worst classes and you just keep rotating expansions to boost them.
Basically.
Okay.
And
Oh, sorry.
yeah. No, they just need to stop giving good cards to mages as well.
Yeah, I don't know if they can do that, but they
I
should.
don't know why. Like, every single expansion, it's like, yes, we're gonna give warriors good cards, but also mages very good cards.
Well, they
Like,
stopped with paladins, right?
They did.
How crazy
They
was
did.
that? They stopped giving paladins good cards. So in OG, the like paladin great card was supposed to be divine strength, which, we overrated. And so it turns out OG wasn't all that good for paladins in terms of the cards they gave it, and then Karazhan was just like also bad. So they're capable of doing it. And if they can give bad cards to paladins, they can give bad cards to mages.
Yeah, definitely.
Like paladins are way more difficult to like create thematic cards that are actually bad. Okay, setting that aside, question from the goat: what is it? We're gonna try to keep this a shorter Lightforge after all these long ones that have been happening.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good idea. I'm all for that. Question from the GOAT this week. Basically, BlizzCon is coming up next week, right? It is less than a week away.
And we're both going.
We're both going.
Oh my
Both of us
god,
are
how
being
crazy is
attending.
that? I thought only I was going, but Merps found some last minute arrangements, and so we'll both be going. We both have media passes, which is gonna be cool.
Wait, do I?
You should. I told you, right? You should respond to that email to
Right,
make sure you're
right.
on that.
I should. I will respond to that email.
Yeah, and if you don't, I'm sure we can make it happen.
I'm sure. I'm
Um,
sure it's not like, like government clearance type of thing where
Yeah.
if you don't get it. Yeah. Anyways, very excited about that. But the question is basically asking, well, since BlizzCon is coming up, and we know that BlizzCon has big announcements usually, we know that the expansions are going to be announced. Do you think there will be an arena announcement of some kind? And if so, what will it be?
Okay, let's talk about this new expansion that's coming up because we have some information. It's been teased. It's Gadgetzan. Welcome to Gadgetzan. Gadgetzan is the Goblin City, and
Oh,
it has
you're going
like
to talk about lore?
I'm gonna talk about lore, and I'm gonna talk about
You've
lore
never
based on what
played
I read from
any.
this one article from Mashable. So this is all the information here. Gadgetzan is run by a band of goblins called the Steamweedle Cartel. Remember, we do have a Steamweedle card in the game already, and it's the Steamweedle Sniper, and it changes your hero power, right? It changes the Hunter hero power to apply to the board. So maybe that's a theme. That would be interesting, and it would be game-changing. So keep that in mind. It's one of the few locations in the game with a neutral bank and auction house. So it's about trading. We have a Gadgetzan auctioneer in the game, which is not really about trading, but you get the idea. I don't know what trades are doing. Like there's the rogues have that whole like thing where you get cards from other classes or whatever. So I'm sure that's gonna be the focus for rogue, but I'm not sure how other classes can participate in this. But yeah, so both Horde and Alliance can sell and buy items across enemy lines. And the town is home to another unique feature, the Thunderdome. The Thunderdome is a large cage set in the middle of the town where heroes can fight against increasingly difficult enemies, like a Horde mode. Think of it like a tiny arena that existed before official arenas were introduced in the game. So it's like an arena. So maybe there's actually something in there for the arenas, or maybe I'm just reading too much into it. But it's not inconceivable that there will be something arena related being added to it. Or maybe it's a new game mode altogether, or maybe there's just nothing and they're going to make more cards. Or maybe the jousting mechanic is coming back, right? Like, who knows, right? But regardless, I think we're almost certainly going to see a new mechanic. What do you think the new mechanic is going to be?
You're asking me to make a new mechanic on the spot?
I'm sure you've thought about plenty of new mechanics.
No, I haven't. I just focus on what's in front of me, okay?
All right,
Crushing
all right.
everyone in front of me.
All right.
Okay, so when I was actually on Value Town, they asked a similar question.
Oh yeah, if you haven't listened, Merps was on Value Town for this last week's Value Town, which is hosted by Chan Man, and you were there with Disguised Toast.
Yep, it was me, Chan Man, and Toast.
Cool. So check that out if you haven't. And Merps talks more about like the Karazhan meta and all that stuff.
Right. So this isn't a new mechanic. Like making up a new mechanic is hard, right? But I am hoping that they implement minions that have two more sort of extra things about them. Number one, positioning matters more, right?
No.
Which I know.
No.
I'm sorry.
Don't do that to me.
ADWCTA no longer infinite.
Don't do that to me. You say that like a joke.
Like positioning matters more. Number two, something that changes the math on the board without changing like the minions themselves. So let's say you have like a 3/3 minion, right? And basically with the 3/3 minion, it'll be like if you attack face, it just deals 3 damage. If you attack a minion, it deals 3 damage to that minion, and let's say 1 damage to adjacent minions, right? To that minion. So it changes sort of like the dynamic in terms of, well, you get more value by killing off a minion, or hitting the board. But at the same time, like, maybe, well, like, it forces you to do these percentages, to look at positioning, and sort of evaluate the board state just a little bit more. So much more interactive board experience.
2/5 minion, deal
Yeah.
triple the amount of, or like deal 4 extra damage if you hit face.
Oh God. Oh
So it's a
God.
6/5 if you're hitting face. If you're hitting minions, it's just a 2/5, 4 mana. I think it's
Right, right.
balanced.
Yeah, yeah, something like that. Because a two
Yeah.
five board wise is pretty terrible, but if you're hitting face, pretty good, man.
Yeah. So, I don't know, there's plenty of cool things you can do, right? And it's Gadgetzan, remember. It's like goblins. And what do goblins do? They make mechs. So, maybe there will actually be, like, legitimately more mechs added to the game, rather than, like, the percent chance you're getting a mech keeps going down a little bit and a little bit and a little bit each expansion. This one may, like, reinvigorate the whole mech thing.
See, I'm afraid of your card now because you didn't say deal 6 damage when goes face. You said deals triple damage,
Yeah, yeah,
which
but
means
then I
if you
changed it. Then I
okay,
changed it
sure,
because
sure.
I realized that's bad for constructed after I said it.
Cold blood, and then it's like you play the 2/5, you conceal it. Next turn, cold blood, they're dead.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, they can taunt.
sure, and that's when you sap them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, that card would
I'm
never
not making
exist.
good cards for
No,
constructed.
you are not making cards ever.
Okay, so that's a question from the goat, and it's brought to you by our patrons. Our patrons are wonderful people who keep this podcast going. If you're thinking of supporting us, please go to patreon.com/grinninggoat and make a pledge. We really appreciate it. Our top patrons from October are 4P, Afro Ninja, TB, Ingo, Talon, and Ugbog. Thank you guys so much for supporting the goat. Yeah. What else are you excited? I kind of want to talk about BlizzCon a little bit more. What else are you excited about at BlizzCon? This is going to be the first. So Merps was at
Diablo 2
TwitchCon,
remake.
but this is the
Diablo
first
2
time either
remake.
of us are going to be at BlizzCon, actually.
Diablo 2 remake.
Okay. So yes, we already have plans, like legit set up plans with our friends who play Diablo 2 to just play it and stream it and like take time off work, if the Diablo 2 remake is happening. But I'm excited to meet people, like because I wasn't at TwitchCon. I haven't met everybody.
Right.
And a lot of people also weren't at TwitchCon who are going to be at BlizzCon, like the people who are like Hearthstone specific. And so it'll be really cool to like meet the other podcasters from the other great. If you only listen to our podcast, there's plenty of other good podcasts. Most of them are, I mean, all of them are constructed focused, which is why we don't like talk about them too much. But you have like the Angry Chicken, the Golden Wisp. Well Met, Valley Town. There's plenty of good podcasts if you play both Constructed and Arena, and I'm sure you guys know about them, but it'd be cool to meet those people. And as well as some of the Constructed players that like I've been watching them for like 2 years on and off, especially around this time. And like just to kind of like be a fan of the Hearthstone thing, even though I don't know much about Constructed. I would watch something, I would be like, oh my god, that's an amazing combo. It's really like if you really know nothing about Constructed and you watch a Constructed match, you're like amazed by what is happening. And then the announcers say like, oh, but you can't play this because they're gonna play that. What do you think the chances are that person has that particular card or like one of those 4 cards? And I'm like, oh man, I don't know, but then every turn something ridiculously big like happens. Like every single turn the board swings totally the other way. It's like a totally
Who
different
knew
game.
that when you can choose to put OP cards in your deck, you put all the OP cards in your deck?
Who knew that every single turn was a combo?
Wow.
Oh my god, totally different game. But yeah, so I'm excited about that, and to actually watch it live, which is going to be cool. We'll definitely be watching the Hearthstone Championships live. And just in case you're worried about it, the stream schedule will be the same. Hafu has been generous enough to lend Merps her streaming laptop so that he can stream during the normal stream times on Thursday and Friday. And yeah. So that'll be really cool, and we'll be back on Sunday. We're taking the red eye back. Like, this is how committed we are to bringing you live Lightforges and Arena Coops whenever possible. We are actually going to like not sleep on Saturday night, take the 6 a.m. red eye from LAX back to the East Coast, and like arrive here, jump in a cab, get back to our apartments, and do the Lightforge so that we can make it like on the dot.
I'll be back just in time, basically.
Yeah, like same here. We
Yeah.
both have like the same kind of like flight. So there will be the Lightforge and the Arena Coupe, and to the extent any of us get delayed a little bit, it'll be like maybe a little late, but it'll be there. And if you're listening to this on the podcast, you will get like the day after BlizzCon ends take from me and Merps about what the announcements are at BlizzCon, because I think it's gonna be the most important like Lightforge when it comes to like future news, right? Because that's when all the info dump happens. And we'll be very excited about that. Okay, card good bad, where we tell you whether a card is good or bad. Kabod Geomancer, you picked this card. We rated a 42. Oh, I think I may have been looking at Mage. No, we rated a 44 normally. It was a 42
Yeah.
because I was looking at like Paladin. But yeah, what?
So
Why
I've
is
just been
it-
drafting this card more so recently, in most classes, just because the meta that we're in, like removals are so premium now. And you know, we've been talking about this for a long time. Just in an unpredictable meta, and in sort of, you know, a meta in which you have to anticipate every single card, safety blankets are amazing. By safety blankets, I mean cards with initiative and spells and just stuff that gets you out of a jam, right? Gets you out of problems. When they drop something like when they drop like a Whirling Zap-O-Matic behind a taunt, you're just like, oh wow, I am on a like very short clock now, so need to get rid of that. Cabal Geomancer, part of the reason that it's always been bad is number one, low impact, number two,
Two,
two
two.
two stats,
Yeah.
right? Two stats are bad.
Like
You
to
just
give you
have
an
to.
idea of how bad 2/2 stats are in the late game, you get
Right.
3 of them from wobbling runs. You get 2 of them from like Savannah Highmane, right? Like Force of Nature gives you 3 of them for 5 mana, and it's not the greatest card in the world.
Yeah. So what I tend like when I was looking at Cabal Geomancer before, I always saw it based on its stats and based on its little impact. Now the way I look at it is, you know, if you have a spell, it is at worst a cheaper Ironforge Rifleman, which we all know now is like an okay-ish card, right?
Yep.
And a cheaper Ironforge Rifleman
If
at
you hit
worst,
it. If you hit it.
right, right. Or, you know, if you have an actual AoE, it's like a cheaper Twilight Flamecaller now,
Yep.
which is a ridiculous card. So it's sort of about how you look at it, right? Like how you look at it. But yeah, I mean, it's not always going to be a cheaper Ironforge Rifleman because you need a spell with it. That's just the way I look at it now. Like, you know, it helps you edge out that damage and extra damage, extra reach. This is why stuff like Elven Archer is good. This is why Ironforge Rifleman is fine. And then, you know, it has a ceiling of actually being something like a Twilight Flamecaller, which is really good. So I've been picking it saying like, okay, this just isn't a 2, right? Like I never count it as a 2. It's just something a little bit extra to help me resolve problems that I have on the board. And it's been doing okay. So
And keep in mind, at 44, you're just looking for anything. Like,
Right,
any way
right.
to help your deck is fine at 44, because you're picking a below average card. Like, it's pretty significantly below average card. And we used to rate it a lot lower. And I think we've just come to the conclusion that it's just, you can actually combo it more consistently than you think. Because a lot of combos, they break because you want to play one of the cards earlier. With Cabal Geomancer, the order is correct. Because whenever you want to just play a card, you probably just want to throw the Cabal Geomancer on the board for some tempo. But if you're saving a card, you're generally saving the spells because they're conditional anyway. And so you're able to play them both on the same turn. And if your Cabal Geomancer is on the board for tempo, you can still play your spells on a later turn. Like, it's the right ordering to get the most value for a card. Of its ability, which makes it less situational than it may seem. You still have to have the spells in your deck, of course, but once you have the spells in your deck, this card can do work.
Yep.
So at 44, you're gonna take it here and there. Like, don't be too afraid to draft this card. Is kind of what we're saying. It's still bad, but it's not like awful.
Yeah, it's actually funny. It used to be picked for me. It used to be picked a lot more often when Karazhan had the offering bonus because shamans actually
yeah,
had
shamans.
yeah because you know you were getting Spirit Claws. So even early on, I'd be like, oh yeah, Cabal Geomancer, it's a pretty good card because it curves out perfectly and a cheap guaranteed activator for your Spirit Claws is amazing.
Yes.
Right. So.
Cool. And let's end with the class that we're going to play after this, Paladins. What a
Yay.
roller coaster ride for Paladins the Karazhan meta has been.
Oh my gosh. So sort of where we left off last time, before the change, I was arguing that Paladins might be the worst class, right? Like just the
Yep.
worst class, period, because of their bad matchup against mages and inflexibility, just bad, kind of like lackluster cards. This expansion, Silver Moon
Yep.
Portal, overlaps with all of their other great 4 mana cards and even 4 mana buffs,
And it's a
right?
situational. Yep.
And it's a situational
And it's
card,
RNG.
and it's RNG exactly. So you never know what you're gonna get. Now that everything has changed and it's more about sort of the board state, Paladins just got a little bit better. Like they had to have gotten better because Mage is not as oppressive anymore.
Card
And
value.
yeah, yeah, card value. They still suffer a little bit because they had no cards taken away from them, and Paladins have a lot of
Bad
weird,
cards.
bad, tricky cards, right? Um,
Yeah, eye for an eye. That tricky card.
Super tricky. Yeah. So that's always a little bit unfortunate that they're consistently stuck with some of these bad cards, but the meta did get better for them. I don't think they are the worst class
They're
anymore,
definitely not
but
the worst guys. Not even
no.
close.
No, but I don't know if I can put them in the top 50%. Like I think they're
Yeah.
still bottom 50%. Yeah.
I think they're in that middle. I don't see a difference between like your shamans, your warriors, your druids, your warlocks, your paladins. Like they're all there now. Like Blizzard balanced it. Like, and I think we're splitting hairs now when we if we're really moving them up or down too much. The thing with the paladin though, that this new patch, the new normal, has really made a good impact on the paladin is because paladins need twos. They need to curve out like crazy. They are a class that definitely needs to curve out, and they don't have that early game that normally other classes have to help them curve out, right? That was always like if you heard us talk about like you could go read my article about the paladins called like Killing Uther, and it like very much focuses on the fact that you used to have no way as a paladin to do anything before turn 4. You were just like totally at the mercy of your opponents if you don't have that like Argent Protector combo. And today you have like a little bit more room. You have like you have your what do you call that? The 3 mana Seal of Champs. But like, and we also, for the same reason, we raised Light's Justice by a lot. It's you need that, and you need to find a way to stay in on the board, right? You got Shield of Minibot now. You need to find a way to stay on the board early. And what Karazhan did is everyone else got better curve because you remove cards from their pool, right? That's what that patch did, where Blizzard rebalanced the classes. So everyone else was better at getting 2 drops and 3 drops than Paladin, just right off the bat. And then Paladins didn't get any 2 or 3 drops for their Karazhan bonus, so it was even worse. So Paladins became like the class least likely to curve out. And it is one of the classes most in need of curving out. Because a lot of your good 4 drops are the Portal and the Blessing of Kings, and your good 3 drop is a Seal of Champs, and your good other 2 drop is a Argent Protector. Like, you need to buff stuff. So you need stuff on the board, and when you can't do that, it like exponentially hurt. Like it just layers on layers of just hurting you disproportionately, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
what happens now is you remove the Karazhan bonus, and so that restores a little bit of your 2 drops and 3 drops. So that helps more than you may at first glance seem like it's helping. So you could take another class that didn't have a 2 drop or whatever, like Priest, and you compare it with Paladin, and Paladin's got help more just by the removal of stuff because they had fewer 2 drops. They had Shield of Minibot and that was it, right? Like, and Priest had whatever Shrinkmeister and that was it. And so, but Priest had less cards in the pool because they took away a lot of the cards, and Paladins had more cards in the pool, and the cards they took away are all class cards, so they're disproportionately impactful. So yeah, so the whole idea is if you just keep drafting Paladins now, you'll just have a much more consistent draft than you did before. And it's still going to be not as consistent as it used to be because they didn't remove any of the really bad cards for Paladin.
Yeah. That's something that'll consistently hold back the Paladins until they do something dramatic because the cards that they got rid of for other classes really helped out these other
Yeah.
classes. Even though we did say that maybe they shouldn't have gotten rid of like Cobra Shot, right? Because
Yep.
that it's not a bad card. In the end, they got rid of cards that were low tier score cards,
Yep.
right? So it inevitably just helps these classes out, and it helps them out really in a really big way because you get rid of like 6 of these cards with low tier scores. You get rid of them, you boost the offering rates of all the other cards, and then paladins are really left behind. It's like their cards have to compensate heavily in order to match the boost that these other classes got. And right now, it's not happening. Like they are, even though they have a lot of these good tier score cards, they have a lot of bad tier score cards as
Mm-hmm.
well. So on average, their tier score is going to be pretty low
Yep.
compared to other classes.
Yep. All right. Well, that's it for the Paladin. We're going to play the Paladin and hopefully do well. It'll kind of depend on the draft, as Paladins usually do. So we're going to end the podcast here, and our next podcast is going to be probably really, really long again because it's going to have all the BlizzCon information. It better be
Yeah.
really, really long because if it's not, that means they didn't give us anything. All right, that means we went to BlizzCon and they were just like, we're going to have a new expansion. Here's like 5 cards from the new expansion. All right, we're done. But assuming they give us more information than that, and they should, and they usually do, we're gonna have a lot to talk about. So it's gonna be a good one. So we'll see you guys next week. Until then, this is ADWCTA.
This is Merps. See you guys.